and they're land, water, climate action, and intentional allyship. Land, I'm sure if you've been to a Zoom or an event in the past 10 years, you're getting familiar with the land acknowledgement. Many events are opened with land acknowledgements, and so I'm Anishinabek. I'm Ojibwe. I live in outside of Sulakaut. What people who lived in this area for thousands of years have called this area is Eabametoong. I think it refers to all the nice sandy beaches that we have here. And I'm a member of Anishinabek First Nations. That's actually it's not even our English name. The French name is Lac Seul, Lonely Lake. It's a big lake in northwestern Ontario, and it's home to three, on Lac Seul in the reserve, there's 3 individual communities. And also Sulakaut is home to many different Indigenous peoples from Anishinabek, the Ojibwe, the Woodlands, Noji Cree, Cree people, Métis, and it's kind of I wouldn't say a melting pot, but Sulakaut and where it's situated in Ontario is kind of a hub for people from a lot of the northern communities that are mostly flying communities. They don't have roads, so they use the airport through Sulakaut, and a lot of them live here now. It's a really important area for Anishinaabe people. Where I live really fortunate to live on a lake, and I know that this area isn't traditional to my family, to my heritage, but I know it's a traditional territory for a lot of the people from Lac Seul, the families that live there, and I feel really fortunate to be living here. It came to my family through my white dad's dad. He bought this property in the 60s. So kind of like, that's my hashtag line back. As I'm getting that through families, through legacy. So that's where I'm from. I acknowledge and I love that. I love where I live. It's a really beautiful spot, and I'm very fortunate to live here. So that's my blurb. I'm going to blurb a lot. I find I might be kind of a guest in this panel, and that I just feel like I have a lot I can contribute to this conversation. I work with LFFC as the Indigenous Relations Coordinator, and actually after this event, I'm going to be discontinuing my work with LFFC. So this is I'm really glad to have been involved with working and putting together this event and really working on this panel. Local food and farm co-ops, if you're not familiar with it or if you're new to the organization, we're a member-driven provincial network with several program areas. A lot of the programs that we work with are co-op field schools, trade routes projects, marketing, communications services, financial bookkeeping services, governance and development consulting. We're a member-driven network, and our team and board work to fulfill LFFC's mission of fostering vibrant, resilient, connected, and sustainable food and farm cooperatives across Ontario. We provide tools, training, resources, and support for food and farm co-ops in the local food sector. We have a number of different projects from our co-op field schools building our cooperative knowledge and networks, such as with board training, incorporation and cooperative development, to our trade routes projects connecting various northern and southern Ontario communities, in coalition building and collaborative initiatives to improve food distribution across the province. We have a network of member cooperatives, from farmers to food distribution and manufacturing to retail grocery co-ops to community cooperatives building upon land trust models and more. Anywhere in the food value chain, from producers to consumers, from seed to supper, benefit from our network of cooperatives in sharing resources, training, and mentorships, and so much more. We have services that are available to the public and also available to members at a discount, such as our communications and marketing, as well as financial and bookkeeping services. To plug the communications and marketing component, all of the communications and marketing for this was done by Susanna, and she's a really nice person to work with. So that's my plug for Susanna. Thank you, Susanna, for all that you put into this. So we have 3 speakers today. I'm going to jump right into welcoming Natasha and Andrew Akawensi. They're the founders of Begidawad Alliance, and they have to leave at 12:30. So I'm going to read their bio and jump it right over to them, and then we're going to have a short Q&A with them before they have to go. So Natasha and Andrew Akawensi, they're founders of the Begidawad Alliance, the previous owners of Akawensi's Fish and More. Begidawad Alliance was formed with other fishing families from the Chippewas of Nawash to bring
Oh, Kanina, you just went mute for a sec. You might just need to
Oh, weird.
go back just for a moment
Okay.
when you were doing the bio. Thank you.
Okay. So Andrew and Natasha Coenzi, founders of Bigotawad Alliance, they're previous owners of Coenzi's Fish and More. Bigotawad Alliance was formed with other fishing families from the Chippewas of Nawash to bring attention to the steep decline of the whitefish in Georgian Bay, and also to bring attention to climate change and its effects on the Great Lakes. Project Bigotawad is working on is a book of fisher stories, citizens science workshops, shoreline cleanups, food sustainability, social enterprises, online discussions of many different topics, and inspiring people to care for our home. We can be found on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And there's their email, and I'll put that on the slides too. So if we, I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll welcome Natasha and Andrew. Thanks you. So nice of you to be here today.
Well, thank you for that warm introduction. It's so nice to be able to see another person from my homeland, Havlaxo First Nation. So I'll start sharing our screen. So this is my husband, Andrew, and we'll get into a quick intro. So I called my PowerPoint Winds of Change. It's an introduction to Bigotawad Alliance and the work that we do and why we're doing it. So in the beginning, we used to be Coenzi's Fish and More. I think it was 2003 that we registered our business, and I could be wrong about that too. We used to sell fresh and smoked Georgian Bay fish, whitefish and lake trout. There's sustainably caught. So we used to sell in Toronto, which we've met a number of you over the years in Orangeville and Owen Sound's Farmers Market. Owen Sound was our closest, one of our larger, closer markets. It was only an hour south of us. We are located at Anishinabek, which is on the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. So on that little strip of land between Lake Huron and Georgian Bay. We have over 15 years of experience with fishing as a business. My husband has many more than that, years of fishing, years experience. So we're going to just fly through the slides. I cannot summarize Bigotawad in 10 minutes or even 15 minutes. We've struggled to summarize Bigotawad in over 90 minutes. So just bear with us. If there's any questions at all, we'll get to them, hopefully. So our name translates to They Set a Net, Bigotawad Alliance. My birth mother gave it to us, the name. We were having a hard time translating fishermen or fishers into our language, and we wanted to be able to include everybody under that title. We were formed to look at climate change and the steep decline of the whitefish. And this is our 3rd year anniversary. We just celebrated it just a couple of days ago. 3 years we've been up and running. We got our paperwork and we were formed as a not-for-profit. And we're led and managed by Indigenous Environment. We're led and managed Indigenous Environmental Not-for-Profit Group. We have 6 people on our board. That's a mix of Indigenous people from Nawash and also Indigenous allies. And Andrew and I, we left our business in August of 2018.
Mothballed.
He says I'm mothballed, I say we left it. So what made us leave our business that we had going for 15 years and we raised our children on? We saw a number of whitefish. The whitefish that we were catching dropped in numbers. We were catching 125 to 150 pounds on a one-night set. When we left, we were lucky to catch 4 pounds, which equals 1 fish, 2 to 3 fish of whitefish. We were catching also 100. When we left, we were catching 125 to 150 pounds of lake trout, so that means it totally switched from whitefish to lake trout in a very quick amount of time. And we always said we would leave if we saw a decline in the fish. This is one from a happier day, this picture of all the whitefish we used to be able to catch. And this was without really thinking about it. This was all whitefish. And you can, if you look really closely at the picture, you can actually see a lake trout kind of sort of underneath everybody. 4 of them. Leave it up to a fisherman to be able to see that. So Bog of the Wad and what we have done so far. We have written and submitted over 100 grants for applications, and that's in 3 years. We've received over $200,000 in project funding. Against project funding, it's not that we get paid, it's just a matter of, you know, bringing in supplies and entertaining people. We have done over 80 plus events, and that's just since last March. A lot of it's done online, of course, because of COVID. So these are just some examples, but every single one of our workshops, we have a post for it that you can find on our social media. So this is what we have done, some examples, and this is something that a lot of other people could do if they ever think of, if they're short on ideas of what the groups could do. So we've done shoreline cleanups.
Be safe, wear gloves.
Be safe, wear gloves. Yes, please be safe and wear gloves when you're doing a shoreline cleanup. We've done a pottery workshop, which was fascinating and people loved it. We also were able to, through that workshop, we were able to clean clay from the local area and use it in our actual pottery, which was really nice because that's what we live on, is a whole lot of clay. We've also did a film school for youth and putting little documentaries together of little stories about climate change and what other people in the community are concerned about. We also did a net seaming workshop. Again, it's not a favorite job for fishermen to do, but it's a necessary job if you want to catch fish. Citizen workshops, citizen science workshops. We do water testing, like looking at algae, looking at the amount of runoff that's happening. We also do like tree identification, plant identification. We do a lot of different citizen science workshops. We have, you know, everything from dissecting fish to just having a lot of fun being outside. We also do a lot of different topics on online discussions. Like today, I have to leave at 12:30 to talk about soil and composting. So we get to talk about worms and
My worms.
okay, Andrew's worms. Andrew has worms. And we get to talk about all the compost that our lovely animals give us, like the chickens and the goats and the horse. You know, they produce us a lot of compost every single day. We also do grant writing workshops because, again, we've submitted over 100 grants. So we kind of know something about grant writing. And we also do a lot of other things. We ask chefs to help us do a presentation online about a meal or shortcuts that they might have. We talk about greenhouses. Oh, every month it ranges from crafting to, and sometimes just checking in with people and making sure everybody's okie dokie out there. So the challenges for the whitefish, and these are not easy challenges that we're looking at. They're huge, and it's going to take a lot of people to look at this and to come up with a solution. Climate change is huge. It's absolutely, well, it's affecting every single person on this earth. The waters are warming in the Great Lakes. There's lack of ice coverage and winds are increasing. Invasive species are eating the whitefish, or they're eating their eggs, or they're covering their habitat. Like where they lay their eggs, they have their eggs on shoals, which is in shallow water. And there's zebra mussels and gobies, and I don't know what else is on there. The one post that we just posted the other day was rock snot, rock slime.
Yeah.
And it covers the bottom of the lakes, which makes the fish not want to be there. There's stocking of predatory fish, so like salmon, lake trout, rainbow. And then there's algae. As you see, the first picture I posted up there was, that's a net covered in algae. And of course, if a net is covered in algae, the fish can see it and you catch nothing.
That net actually has the water, actually has drained out of the algae. that net was almost twice that size as I was pulling it in. That's after all the algae and the water is leaked out of it and that. So bringing it in, it was almost the size of about a 2.5, 3-inch diameter hose, and that trying to bring all that slime in. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, it's good. And that's, again, that's from a fisherman's point of view, and that's incredibly heavy. So if you don't have to work out at a gym if you're a fisherman, because all you have to do is go fishing. Diaprea, baby whitefish food source, is disappearing. That's that little creature that I showed you just beforehand, that little yellow thing, zooplankton, which is really necessary for whitefish to eat when the little guys. And then we have charts. We also have a scientist that I call my science guy. He provides me with all the charts because he tracks these things about ice coverage, about high winds, and how climate change is just affecting us overall. So the challenges for the SON fishers. And again, you have one here, which is unique to get a fisherman to do a Zoom meeting. So this is a version of a boat. This is not my husband's boat, but it's another one of the SON fishers. This is called a tug. My husband fishes out of a punt, which is a 24-foot open steel boat. I think it's 24 foot, yeah. And 7 foot wide. So it's slightly different, well, majorly different. So what the SON fishers are seeing is the decline in their catch. They're also having to take many more risks of going out on windier days. And nets are being damaged by algae, and very few youth are picking up the lifestyle. And we call it a lifestyle. We don't call it a job, because to be a fisher, just like a farmer, you live it and you breathe it every single day. So trying to leave it on a bit more of a positive note, because this is really overwhelming to a lot of people, and these issues are huge. They're not easily solved. So what can you do? Well, you can help us do a shoreline cleanup by organizing one and do something. You can also talk to your family and friends about climate change, because this is always an awkward conversation to have with people. People get uncomfortable talking about climate change because it's huge, or they don't think it's affecting them. And then when you talk about climate change, talk about solutions. And it could be small. It could be things like not using plastic bags, not using plastic wrap, reusable coffee mugs, not disposable things, plastic utensils. So it can be small things, but just to talk about solutions too, because people want to know that something can be done. Reduce your garbage and purchasing excess stuff. Do you really need those extra things in your house? Or if they're like one-time use buy, is it really necessary? Like when you go to the dollar store, how long is that going to last? If you spent an extra $20, will it last longer? And could you hand it off to somebody else when you're done with it? Don't use fertilizer too often, because it causes algae. It will run off and end in the water and cause algae, which you've seen, it causes issues for fisher people. So lend your voice to another species that is struggling. So we lend our voice to the whitefish. We talk about whitefish. We can talk about whitefish for hours. We can talk about the decline we've seen and the issues that they're facing. And learn more about the Great Lakes and the life forms in them. Because when we talk about the Great Lakes, one, we have challenges getting people to even know where the Great Lakes are, let alone to be able to name them all, and to know which way the water flows. So learn about them and the life forms that are in them. We're talking about like zooplankton and the different species of fish and the things that are reliant on the Great Lakes. And you know what? We're reliant on the
Oh, did they freeze? Natasha, I think she froze. I think you froze. Okay. I know she does, they do have to go soon. That was a really sobering way to start this, wasn't it? I'm just going to open up their presentation. I have a copy of it, and to see if there was another slide after this. Okay. What they've said after the next slide, I'll just read it out loud, is how can you help Begedawad? Share or like our social media posts, help us when we are fundraising, invite us in to speak in person one day, but we can also do virtual. Participate in our events online, and soon we will be doing shoreline cleanups. Talk fish to us. I really like that. Be passionate about our planet. And I said, imagine if this was the only planet we have. And I think like, right, it really is. So they've got a bunch of Twitter links. I have it on the slide that I can share later. Yeah, that was really sobering. And it just kind of breaks my heart. And like, I think about the drastic ways that this land that we live on has been affected by capitalism, by colonial, capitalism as a result of colonialism, and it's just mind-blowing. And then I feel like so much of that is left to Indigenous people to be somehow doing the hard work for it. Thank you for my earrings. I just want to, I curated these very carefully today. These are whitefish scales. I was thinking of Natasha and Andrew, and they were harvested from the lake that I live beside here. And they're made by a Métis artist who lives in Sulicote, who is also a friend of Kyla's, who will be speaking in a little bit. I think I could go on about earrings all day, but that's not really great. So like food is just it's just such an important, crucial part. And I don't know if other people feel this way or non-Indigenous people feel this way, but food, the way that we were brought up talking and learning about food is that food, and it feeds our souls more than it feeds us. Like it feeds our bodies for sure, it nourishes us. And I think it was, Susanna, was it Don the other day that says the food, it becomes us, right? It was something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I feel like that's how I feel as an Indigenous person, is that I have a really strong connection to the food that I eat. And I recognize so much that the food that comes from the land that is here is really the food that we should be eating, that food that feeds my body the best and nourishes my body and my soul the best. And that's the way that I speak and think about food. So thanks so much. I don't know if they're here anymore. That was really amazing to hear about Begedawad Alliance. There's lots of, and I really loved how they have really simple things that you can start doing today to help support what they are wanting to do. That was really beautiful. And I think we can talk about it more. If we want to get into this, we have an hour and a half scheduled. We can go a little bit over. I would love to we could just talk about this after. So our next guest isn't really a guest because he wasn't able to be here. Rudy Wabus, he is the farm manager for the Fort Hope farm in the Eabametoong First Nation. The non-Anishinaabe name for that is Fort Hope. So Rudy manages the band-operated farm, Fort Hope Farm in the Eabametoong First Nation, a flying community 300 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay. Development of the farm began in 2016 as a result of a partnership with the community elder and a private businessman. With no farming background, Rudy began helping at the farm as it was getting started. Over the years, he was mentored into the position of managing the farm. In the first year of the farm's production, it grew 14,000 pounds of potatoes, and all of those were donated to the community. In 2018, the First Nation and the farm was recognized by the Rural Ontario Leaders Award. So it's just been around for a few years, and it's a really amazing story. So what we have is it's kind of, I joke this is going to be such a res presentation. And that Rudy doesn't Zoom. He kind of laughed at me when I talked about Zoom and trying to get him to connect with me on Zoom. So what I did was I called him on my cell phone. I recorded the conversation on speaker on my iPad, and I sent that all to Susanna with some photos, and she's put together a thing for us to try to watch. So bear with me. This is going to be it's going to be fun. But we also have a transcript. Susanna, can you put that in there?
So while Kanina is getting this set up, like she mentioned, this was a bit of finagling, but hopefully it comes through all right. I'm gonna also, so in the chat, I have a document you guys can click on. Hopefully it'll open up so you can view the transcript, so you can follow along with what they're saying. So bear with us with a bit of the audio. It kind of goes a little, it's not equalized properly, but I'm also going to upload the PDF. And if you are on Whova, I did upload this as well too into this session. So I'm just going to put that as a PDF as well. And yeah, if everyone wants to turn their cameras off, I think that the video plays better when cameras are turned off. And I will put this link into Whova as well and send with the finalized video of recording of this as well. So we will have this captured. You'll have video for it.
Okay, and I didn't figure out how to put this into a different panel or a different tab, so I've just got this kind of zoomed in. Again, this is like, we're gonna make it work. And you can hear my son playing in the background, and it's like a phone from my cell phone to the phone, the Bell phone in Fort Hope. So yeah, bear with us. I think you'll still be able to hear it. So.
My name is Rudy Wobbles. I'm from Fort Hope, Ontario.
Okay, what do you do, Rudy?
I do the farming up here.
Yeah. Would you tell me a bit about, tell me some about your farm, or not your farm, but the farm that you manage.
My mom started, plan was, we started planting in like 2015 with my uncle and a few others. I was just a helper. If I wanted to manage it, I don't know, I don't have the skills.
Yeah.
But I just tried it. I was thinking I wasn't planning on staying long, so it was just a summer project. Farming. I enjoy it. I like it. Can't do anything else right now.
So you said your uncle and a few other people were involved in getting it started?
Well, it all started with my uncle, my late uncle. He was in dialysis. I ran into this nurse, and her name was Harriet DeBroom. That's where we met. That's where Aryan came in after that. So we introduced him to Aryan. We started something. We started planning. Farm up here.
Yeah. Would you tell me a bit about Eabametoong and where it's located, and why that would be beneficial and why that would be tricky, or that would be a lot of work?
Well, we're about 200 miles north of Thunder Bay. It's probably about 2,500 people that live here. There's a lot of people that live off right there. It's beneficial because our fruits and vegetables are like ordered. I don't know where they ordered them, but they're real expensive. So I sell my product, like my vegetables and that, I sell for a cheap price.
it's you don't have a all-season road, right?
No, we only have a winter road during the winter.
Okay. And then all the other.
That's how we got all our equipment and like our rotor tiller and all the farm equipment.
It was brought in on the winter road on the truck, right?
Yeah, the tractor was flown in by helicopter.
Oh, cool. And so the produce that is available to buy in the community all comes from the plain, at least what, 11 to 10 months a year, 10 to 11 months a year? Or all year? I don't think they still don't drive produce up on the winter road. They still fly that in.
It comes in by plane.
Is there a northern store? Or is it a community store?
Locally owned store, and there's two of them kind of smaller, like a convenience store. The other one's just a regular store.
Right. Okay. When did the farm? What was the first year of operation? Like when did they start digging?
2016 we started.
What did you grow in 2016?
Nothing. That was just clearing the ground, clearing the area of trees and roots and all that kind of stuff.
So you mentioned that Arjen de Bruin came, and so he has the growing knowledge, correct, from Thunder Bay?
Yeah.
Did he locate the ground for the growing, or was that knowledge already, was the spot already picked out in the community?
It was kind of picked out, I guess. Like, I don't know how it started, but I was there at the beginning, like and then my planning committee and stuff like that. I was just a worker, I guess.
Yeah, I joke that those people are the workhorses. Yeah, but they're very important. Okay, so the first year in 2016, they were tearing up ground, getting rid of, creating the area to grow in. What was planted in 2017?
Just potatoes and peas, cherry tomatoes, regular tomatoes, what we call carrots, a little bit of carrots, and a few other stuff there, and strawberries.
Cool. And how did everything go really well, or did you learn from that year you might not try this then another year? How did that go?
No, it was like a learning experience. Like I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how to grow things and stuff like that. So we just went with everything grew pretty good.
Cool. And then what happened with all that produce that was the stuff that was grown that year?
The first year we grew about, we planted we got out of the tomatoes, we got about 500 pounds, 400 pounds maybe or less of tomatoes. Potatoes we did roughly 15,000 pounds.
Wow.
The first year anyway, first year we just gave it all the way to the community so they could come out and pick their own potatoes and stuff. Just like a thank you kind of thing.
That's great.
The second year was good. We had to save a lot of potatoes, maybe a little more. Carrots and green onion. And we tried some other stuff. That worked pretty good. It was good. It was a good season, but rain, most of the potatoes, the rain just kept raining.
Right. And everything's outside at this point, right? So you're really kind of at the mercy of the weather.
2018 was a long award. We had to go to Toronto to pick up our award.
Yeah. How did it feel to be recognized for that work?
It felt pretty good, like I'm not the kind of guy that I just like what I do and be recognized, I guess.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, it's I don't know of any other communities in Northern Ontario that have a farm of that size. Do you?
Yeah. Not yet anyway.
Yeah, I'm hoping that people's other communities see what you're doing, what's been happening in the Eabametoong, and see that it can happen, that it is feasible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you've been growing for food in the ground for 2017, 18, 19, and 20. Are you already planning for this year?
Yeah, I will be doing that in probably in a few weeks. I'll get started. I'm working at I have another job, a winter job.
Yeah. What's your winter job?
Oh, I work at the clinic.
Okay.
I do day security and maintenance during the winter.
Right. And so your work is with the farm is paid for by the community. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a band funded project. You did get funding, right? Yeah, there was funding.
OTS, I think.
Okay.
They gave us enough for 3 years to get started. And
Yeah. I imagine there might be hopefully more funding opportunities as well. But if you've been able to use that funding for a lot of the upstart work, it might be, do you feel like it's something that could be sustainable by the community, given what's been put into it through funding?
yeah, probably could be.
Right. And that's what the work that I've done in the area, that's a big thing that I see is the challenge is sustaining momentum in a project like this, right? Or similar projects, and making it so it's not a project. I was just on another call and I was talking about that term project. I don't like it because it's not something that is something you're just going to pick up for a little bit. It's really something you have to build it into your life, or it becomes a thing that is just there. It's something you do, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you find there's other interest in the community to be working at the farm?
Yeah, there's some help from OW and HSS, Health and Social Services.
Yeah, that's great.
And they told me in the school, I guess, like kids come out and pick their own potatoes and stuff like that.
Cool. That must be really great to see them, kids getting in there, digging up and saying, this is a potato and we can eat this.
Yep. Getting their hands dirty.
Yeah. We're for the assembly next week, we're also showing a film called First We Eat. And it was regarding a woman in Dawson City, Yukon, wanted to have her family go for a whole year with only eating food that they could get within that area. So either grow it, hunt it, pick it. And they did it for a year, but a big motivation for her was that she felt like her kids didn't have a connection of where their food came from. It was just something you buy at the store. And I feel like as Indigenous peoples, we have a better sense of where our food comes from the land, right? But also when you have a community store that flies in bags of carrots, you really don't have that connection of where those foods come from. So that's great to see that that's happening there, and the students get to be there and involved with digging up potatoes and carrots. That's really powerful. I have a few other questions. What do you think has led to the success of this, of the farm, getting to where it is today, where it's been growing and growing every year, I'm assuming? What's contributed to that?
Hard work. Just hard work and love what you're doing. I guess I don't think of it as a job. I just like doing it. I enjoy it. There's good support from the band council. Like they encourage me to keep going and do stuff like that. encouragement.
Right, that's crucial. Yeah, I can imagine it would be hard to want to keep doing that if you weren't getting, good feedback from the leadership and the community.
Yeah.
How crucial was it that you had there was the partnership with De Bruin? How important was it the partnership with De Bruin was there?
It was good. It was really good. Like we're still good friends. We're actually good friends now. Now that I was happy to meet him. He showed me a lot of stuff. Teach me about farming and growing and how to grow it and stuff like that. Yeah, he's been a good help.
Yeah.
But he's always going to be there when I need his help on anything.
Right. I used to joke with a colleague of mine that she was training with me, and I would joke that one day I was just going to boot her out of the nest. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like you're getting the boot.
Yeah.
But it also sounds like you've got the wings and the knowledge of how to fly. So, and that's great.
Getting there.
Yeah. And so I kind of asked us, how important do you think the mentorship piece is in being successful? So, like, do you think that this would have happened without that mentorship?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it would never happen. I probably only I think it would be managing it if I didn't get any help from Arian or the community.
I think what I'd like people to get out of this, like, especially we're going to have some farmers, and they're all going to be, not all, but majority of them will, I think, be from Southern Ontario. And I think it'd be really great if people could be at this panel thinking, hey, maybe there's a First Nation I could partner with, right? And wanting to hopefully inspire some chances of, mentorship or sparking an idea within farmers. Because that's how I did speak with Aryan, and that's what it sounded like. He'd met your uncle and was like, hey, we can do something. I can contribute my knowledge in a way that would help your community. Yeah. There's a real potential for knowledge exchange between, I think, farmers and Indigenous peoples and communities.
Yeah, I think there is. I'm supposed to go to a few communities and show them how.
Okay, cool. Do you think that's something that you'll be looking at doing, maybe not this year, but next year?
Yep.
So, well, that would be great if that happened. And I also think that you as Anishinabek going to another community where you know the challenges, it might be more perceived in a different way, right? In a more positive way. Yeah, and you say, I've done that, we've done it. It can happen here. Okay, me go, Trudy. This is great. Yeah, really awesome.
Alrighty.
Okay. Okay, thanks for bearing with me through that. I can provide more context if you want to that. So it actually came apart. The Aryan De Bruin and Rudy's uncle, Ron, his late uncle Ron, met via Aryan De Bruin's wife, who was a nurse at the hospital in Thunder Bay, and they got to talking, and they started a business. So Aryan and Ron O'Keefe started a business, and they marketed it first to Fort Hope, to Eabametoong, and then they've also done work to promote it among other flying communities in the north. And right now, Eabametoong is the only one that they've dug into the ground and are growing. But I know Aryan would like to see and like to support other communities, and it sounds like Rudy will be helping him with that, hopefully in hopefully next year, maybe this year, we could get to visiting again in other communities. So let's just jump right to Kyla. We'll have Kyla join us and not over a video or a phone call, recorded phone call. So Kyla Pascal is born in here I go. Amiskwachewaskahigan, Edmonton. Kyla Pascal is the community builder and maker of Métis and Dominican descent, the granddaughter of farmers, so grain and cattle in Alberta and banana and vanilla in Dominica. Kyla has always valued the relationship between community, culture, food, and justice. It was through years of working in the Edmonton food and coffee scene that she noticed the potential of change making across tables and bar tops. Kyla recognizes the importance of hearing our connections with the land and has been slowly developing her skills around growing food and harvesting. Kyla currently lives and studies on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsuut'ina, and Watuth and Squamish peoples. I really get tongue-tied when I'm trying to read like other Indigenous languages, and that's in Vancouver. And Kyla's here kind of representing Indigenous Climate Action, but also really just here to provide her knowledge. So Miigwech, Kyla, welcome.
Hi. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and hope for the best. Okay, wonderful. Minimize and present. Okay. All right, and you can hear me all right? See everything okay?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again for having me. As mentioned, my name is Kyla Pascal, and I work with Indigenous Climate Action. So I'll be speaking about Indigenous Climate Action and the work we do, but I'll also be speaking a little bit to the work that I do personally. So let's jump into it. So you heard my bio, but I'll expand a little bit more about it. So I am Afro-Indigenous. I am a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. My mom is Métis from St. Paul, Alberta region, and my dad is from Dominica and immigrated here to Canada in the 70s. So I was born in Amiskwachewaskahigan, which is Edmonton, but I currently live and study. I'm in grad school doing community planning on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples, Vancouver. It definitely takes practice, especially when that's not your the language of where you typically spend your time or grew up in. And I've been working at Indigenous Climate Action for over a year in a variety of capacities. They kind of just put me where they need someone, and it's been really lovely. And then, as mentioned, I like to frame the work that I do largely in the fact that I am the granddaughter of farmers. So yeah, as mentioned, grain and cattle in Alberta and banana and vanilla in Dominica, and recognizing that they both inform, even though I did not grow up in Dominica, that connection still lives in me. And then beyond my grad school work and my Indigenous Climate Action work, I do a lot of other food stuff. So currently I am the co-creator and co-editor of a literary food zine called Hungry, that we will be, our first issue will be out in June, which is pretty exciting. Prior to COVID in Edmonton, I was doing a really exciting and wonderful event series called Know Our Kitchen, where we had hosts BIPOC. So for those who are unfamiliar, BIPOC is the acronym Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. So we had BIPOC chefs from Edmonton host a night where they cooked, and we had a group of about 30 people, and we chatted about food justice, social justice, race, culture, kind of whatever came up. And it was really wonderful, but you know, COVID said no, so we had to stop doing that. I'm on the steering committee of an organization called Food for Good, and I like to garden. So prior to prior to me moving to Vancouver in last August, I was involved with the community garden. And then I'm hoping this year I've started reaching out that I can get involved with some in Vancouver. All right, so a little bit about Indigenous Climate Action. So we are an Indigenous-led organization guided by a diverse group of Indigenous knowledge keepers, water protectors, and land defenders from communities and regions across the country. We believe that Indigenous peoples' rights and knowledge systems are critical to developing solutions to the climate crisis and achieving climate justice. A little bit about the work that we do. So our work is not specific to food. It is more broadly climate and environmental focus, but we also recognize that these systems are all interrelated and everything impacts everything. But a few of our main things that we do, so we host gatherings, obviously prior to COVID, where we would have community members and leaders from across Turtle Island, and we would come together and just connect and talk about climate work. We do a lot of amplifying voices, so we have quite a big reach and our social media following. So we really like to kind of pass the mic in terms of sharing the work that is happening across Turtle Island. So we do a lot of that work. We provide resources and tools to communities and to the general public just around Indigenous sovereignty, Indigenous climate work, and climate work in general. And then a big thing that we do is supporting Indigenous sovereignty. I want to point out that we recognize that the Indigenous work, Indigenous people, we are not a monolith. So it looks really different, and the needs of various communities across Turtle Island are really different. And so we like to support in however that looks, that the communities feel is what's best or needed for them. And that can be frontline work, that can be policy work, that can be campaigns. We do all sorts of things. And then lastly, a new thing that we have been developing and working on that I'm really excited about is healing justice work. And so what that is basically recognizing that our own healing, both individually, as a community, as a culture, is imperative to climate work. I think when we heal ourselves, we also heal the land. And so that's something that we are working on, really kind of leaning into and developing over the next few years. So I'm really excited about that one. So as we talk about Indigenous food sovereignty and Indigenous work around our food systems, I like to kind of lay the foundations with these stats that I think are really important to know and be cognizant of. So Indigenous people represent 5% of the global population. That is very small, and that is also a result of colonialism, imperialism, violence, and harm. And over 80% of the world's biodiversity is within our lands and territories. That's a lot. And I think that also really informs the work that we do and our connection with the land and kind of that protective aspect. I also like to also point out that I think we often, when we're talking globally, we always think Indigenous peoples of North America or Turtle Island, as I often say, but also recognizing that Indigenous people exist on all continents, and to just be mindful that indigeneity looks different, but is just as relevant and important off Turtle Island. And then we are the original, kind of to build off that, we are the original inhabitants in over 90 countries around the world, representing over 5,000 languages and distinct cultures. So Indigenous food sovereignty, to build a little bit off of, to kind of lay the foundations, I guess I should say. Indigenous food sovereignty is a specific policy approach to addressing the underlying issues impacting Indigenous peoples and our ability to respond to our needs for healthy, culturally adapted Indigenous foods, and have the ability to make decisions over the amount and quality of food we hunt, fish, gather, grow, and eat. And I think the other two panelists were wonderful examples of sovereignty in action. Yeah, I don't even feel like I need to speak too much about it, because we saw what that looks like. They gave very relevant examples. So then next up, so I have a few questions. These are not to, you don't have to write in your answers into the chat box. You don't have to come back to it in the little Q&A, but just things to kind of sit with and be cognizant of, and just noticing that it can be a bit uncomfortable to ask these questions, because often this is rooted in the harms of colonialism and violence that has happened against Indigenous people and racialized people. So the questions are, can we unlearn the colonial culture of food? How can a colonial food system be reshaped, and by whom? How do we repair atrocities of the past? And how do we connect with food and with the land? And feel free to write these down, to screenshot it, and maybe even just like journal about it later, think about it. Because you're at this session because you care about food and the land. And so I think this just is like a deep dive into that and really thinking about it. So I invite you to think about that later, or maybe tomorrow, or whenever it feels good and right. So I know when I do panels and talks like this, folks always want answers, always want to know what can I do? What are the steps that I can take? And just recognizing that there's no quick fix to this. Where we are in our food systems is the result of centuries of colonialism, and it will not be, and I would like to also add capitalism and how those largely influence where we are within our food systems. But a little bit of my insights and thoughts around kind of responding to those questions that I just asked. So one is recognizing the colonial and racist histories in our food systems. So I'll just, I like to kind of give space to that one, because it is quite awful when you think about it. On the prairies, you can go to Head Smash in Buffalo Jump, which is wonderful site. If you are ever in Southern Alberta, highly recommend. But they just have those horrifying photos of just all the buffalo heads that they were just killed as a tactic of controlling and essentially killing Indigenous communities in the prairies. And so a bunch of wonderful, beautiful animals that I hold very near and dear to my heart were killed in the name of colonialism. That's a very real history. Recognizing that Indigenous peoples were pushed off of their land and forced onto reserves, and then having those lands be given to settler communities is a reality. And that is something hard to sit with. And it's okay. This isn't an attack on anyone. It's just the realities. And personally, I think of my Métis family settled and farmed on the North Saskatchewan River. And my Métis great grandfather, he had money, which I'm sure was rooted in some sort of, there's reasons people get rich. They have the privileges and, various insights. Anyways, but to say that originally that was not Métis land, and you have to be real with that, and that's okay. But what can we do in thinking about that, and where does that put us in our relationship to the land that we are farming and interested in being in relationship with? So yeah, those are some of the things to think about. And then the next one is amplifying the voices and support the existing work of BIPOC communities around food. I thought the other two panelists were just so wonderful. The work that they are doing was so amazing. And it also reminded me of how much Indigenous work, Black people of color across Turtle Island, how much of it has been invisibilized because their stories are hidden. We don't often see the narrative of the Indigenous farmer, but Indigenous people have been farming for centuries on this land. I think that's often a conversation that is hidden, and the idea that Indigenous people didn't farm, I think it looked obviously very different than the past couple hundred years, but they did. That is a reality. And so how do we amplify and support those folks who are doing the work? And I think that was kind of discussed in the previous panel. Actually, in both of them, like that is incredibly important work that's happening. And so how do we support those folks and amplify their voices? And then lastly, because I'm really on this train of healing and how it really informs the work that we do, how we are able to continue to do the work. If you're tired, if you are struggling, which is very real, especially with this COVID year. If you are not doing well, it's that kind of that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So how do you heal your own relationship with the land, with yourself, with your communities and communities around you? So kind of thinking about that, I think is very enlightening and helps to kind of situate ourselves in a good place, and a place where we are able to continue to do this work, because doing food work and food justice work and farming and fishing and hunting, these are not easy things to do. And so how do we make sure that we are in a good place and in the right place to do this? And then I always I've been adding this little image in my food presentation slides, because I just love it. It's the medicine wheel, 4 directions. And I just really like how the framing of it, of the interconnectedness of it all. Yeah, and so that's the medicine wheel, the food medicine wheel. I'm not sure what website I got it from, which is not a good thing. You should always source your things, but I think you could probably Google it and find it. And then I like to end off with this quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer from her book Braiding Sweetgrass, which, if you are unfamiliar with, run, do not walk to go pick it up, get it from your library. She also does it as an audiobook, and she has, if you've ever been on a panel, seen her speak on a panel, her voice is just so relaxing. So I highly recommend it as an audiobook. But it just says, in some native languages, the term for plants translates to those who take care of us. And I really like it because I think it's, again, this relationship. It is not just like a taking, but there's this kind of symbiotic relationship in which we are working with the plants and with the animals, and we are taking care of them and they are taking care of us. And I think that's a great way to think when we are farmers or growers or harvesters, hunters, fishers. And then that's that. You can follow Indigenous Climate Action. I highly recommend, is wonderful, has wonderful social media. Our comms team on just getting to know all the amazing work that's happening across Turtle Island. If you have questions and we don't get to them or something and you want to email me, that is my email. And then that's my little food Instagram account. And that's everything. I will stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kyla. I'm going to put up my presentation again, and it'll have the, is this the one? No, no. A bit more of the, if you want to write these down or take a bigger screenshot of both of the Begitawad and Indigenous Climate Action and Kyla. So Kyla loves food on Instagram, right? Was that it?
Kyla P. Yeah, Kyla P loves food.
Okay, Kyla P loves food. I as well love food. How about we all raise our hand? We love food. Thanks so much, Kyla. That was really awesome. And it's really nice to hear your personal story of food and then also the work you're doing and the schooling you're doing. And yeah, that was really great. Thank you so much. So you're our only panelist here that can speak to questions. I hope that's okay.
Sure.
I wrote a little bit of notes. I really liked your focus on healing right now. And I think about healing our relationship with the land. I just want to, again, reiterate that. That was so nice just to hear. And I think that's what I feel like capitalism and maybe colonialism has done to so many people, is that we don't have that connection to land. And for myself, I feel like I'm just getting it back. And I only got that back in like my mid-30s, even though I grew up here in this beautiful spot on the land. I spent years in the city and then I felt so disconnected. I'm getting it back. And as I'm getting it back, so is my relationship with food coming back. Okay, I'm going to turn off my slides, then we can just chat, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question from Susanna, and framing it with the, you're thinking about the large movement of Idle No More and the larger amplified voices from Wet'suwet'en in BC. Do you feel that there's been a shift in consciousness with people are paying more attention to Indigenous-led issues because of those movements?
Yeah, I think there has been a bit of a consciousness shift in social justice in general. Like I think, like with the summer, we were seeing like Black Lives Matter stuff, Idle No More, the pipelines and everything. And I think there is a general consciousness, awareness of social justice, but at the same time, these communities have been doing this work for decades and centuries, and they're going to continue to do this work without the social media spotlight. And because I think the folks doing the work that are really doing the work are going to, they're going to do it whether the cameras are on or not. And so I do think, yes, there has been, like, we're going to see it in the news a little bit more, because I think it's a little bit more spicy. It's a little bit more like, you can't really ignore when, well, I mean, you can. So the media definitely does ignore. It's a little bit trickier to ignore when, hundreds of people are in the streets, or, the youth for Wet'suwet'en were at the legislature in Victoria, and are like, holding space there and being like, we will not be silenced, like we will be seen. So it's a little bit trickier. But I mean, Oka crisis, like that was, what was that, the 90s? Like these folks have been doing this, work for forever. So it's there, it's always happening. If you want to look for it, if you want to see it, that's, I think, the difference. It's like, do you want to see it? Do you want to know that the work is happening? Because it is. But like even the conversation about like, and it's all connected, so I'll bring it up, but the farmers in India, like how much airtime that's been getting. That's been like the biggest, that was the numbers of people out protesting in India around farmers' rights was bigger than like any BLM thing, but like very few people have heard about it. So I wouldn't rest anything on the media amplification, because the work is always going to happen. I don't know if that answered it. I'm just popping off.
It's good, yeah, all good points. And it made me think, well, late last night, making notes for this presentation, I finally checked out the Goodawad's Instagram, and they Natasha and Andrew are doing so much, and it's like active. They've done tons of workshops all the time, and I'm like, how did I not hear about, and I know Suzanne has been telling me about them for a while, but I didn't even check myself, right? Like, so I'm guilty of that, of kind of the ignorance and the not seeing things that are happening, and there's so much. So I think that's what I really love from what your presentation had, and then Andrew and Natasha's, like, here's things you can do, and then also yours was just so self-reflective, because I think that's what so much of it is that we kind of live in a state of willful ignorance. So I know I do for sure at times. So we have to be wanting change, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I see a question from the chat that I think we can definitely speak to. Josephine asks, how best do you see Black and Indigenous food sovereignty movements working together, and how can we awake settler descendants to support both? So we're having another conversation after this with looking at the Black food movements in Toronto. And we've had a few other conversations. Actually, our keynote panel was Don Morrison with 2 farmers from Jackson, Mississippi, like the brownest panel keynote I've ever seen. It was really friggin' awesome. Like, and so much of the stuff that they were sharing is just so many common things, like commonalities between them. I feel like there's so much we can be doing, or so much we are doing similar. How can we work more together and support each other?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love to speak of it, not only because of my identity being rooted in both camps, but I definitely see Indigenous sovereignty and Black liberation 2 sides of the same coin. So we need both of those things to get the work done, and to really, I think, move in towards this kind of like more radical liberatory place that I think would be better for everyone. Like, I think everybody benefits when Indigenous folks have land back and their own sovereignty. And I also think that everybody benefits when Black people are not being harmed. They are not living terrible lived experiences as migrant workers in the farms across Canada, because people don't think that happens, but that's like a very big conversation that I always like to bring into the conversation, is like migrant workers, especially, I mean, they're everywhere, but like BC, Ontario are like heavy hitters for migrant workers and their conditions. I think there has to be a cohesion between the two, and we do better we're stronger together. That is just the reality. And I think, to speak, and I know attention often comes up around Black people as settler, and I would really like to push back on that. I read a really wonderful article once, and it framed Black people as displanted, not as settlers. And so the difference there was, for the most part, Black people, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, Black people are Indigenous, right? Like, Black people are Indigenous to Africa, and Black people were enslaved and brought to North America. They did not choose to be here. Of course, everybody's like, we'll go back, but it's like, do we really want to start having that conversation about like, go back home? Because that can we did the numbers, we crunched the numbers, 5% Indigenous populations, like, where's everybody else going? So anyways, so I think, and then even new immigrants. So then the conversation happens of new immigrants moving to Canada, and they're like, well, those people weren't slaves. But no, they're not slaves, or enslaved people, I should say. But they are folks whose lives and homes are a result of like imperialism and colonialism. So my dad is from Dominica. It is a very, very poor island in the Caribbean. It's, your quality of life there is like not great. And they have what's called like brain drain. Like everybody leaves Dominica. Their population is like declining because there's like, and it's been ravaged by the Spanish and the French, who like colonized. They killed all of the Indigenous people, a huge majority of the Indigenous people. Anyway, so everybody, like, people move elsewhere for better opportunities, which we have to grapple with. Like, that is a reality. So yes, the Indigenous people, like, this is their lands, this is the homelands, they've been here for centuries. And the realities of where we are, and as a result of imperialism and colonialism, leaves us in this very complicated place. So it's important to look back at that, but also move forward in a way that is good for everyone and, you know, makes sense. And I will add to a group that I really think folks should check out. Oh gosh, now I can't. Molly Swain and Chelsea Vowell are two Indigenous thinkers and writers, and they actually they have a podcast called Métis in Space, but they are also very interested in this conversation of like land back. And so they did this big campaign, and they ended up getting a big chunk of land just outside Edmonton that was like through crowdfunding, which was amazing. And to do like on the land work. And they also really speak to the connection and like having not just Indigenous people out there, but Black people and like everybody in terms of like of learning and being able to connect to the land. That was a bit of a, I just really went off. Stop me anytime, because I can really
No, I wasn't going to. I love the bit of it. Thank you for that. Like, I think it's so, I really appreciated hearing you say that about, and that, like, I feel like I learned that. And I know, I think in a lot of Indigenous communities, there's still a lot of anti-Blackness. So thank you for for shining a light on that. And Josephine did say that her additional comment was, stolen people on stolen land have a different, though related history. So like, looking at Black people as settlers really doesn't jive well. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, where's my notes? Can you speak to land back some, like, and frame it in a way of farmers? Oh, yes. Like, I know we talked a little bit about it, but, and kind of picking up what I was trying to get at with Rudy is that, like, I feel like there's this big opportunity. How can that happen more? If you can speak to that, if not, that's fine. Or
definitely. Yes, and that was why I brought up Molly and Chelsea was, if folks are familiar with Young Agrarians, the organization Young Agrarians, so I do some stuff with them and go out to their like mixers and things. And they had actually, Molly and Chelsea came and did a talk, and they had a really great conversation about just thinking about farmers in relation to land back, because it's a complicated conversation, and I don't think it needs to be it doesn't have to be as fraught as we think it is. I think that's our tensions and our own stuff coming up and being like, oh well, land and weird ownership things. And I know we have various lands across Alberta and like the little region that my family farms, and as it kind of like my grandparents were the last farmers, and I would ideally love to start farming eventually, but there's lots of land there, and I know, being radical, that I'd be like, let's figure out a land back situation. Like, what does that look like? But I have tens of cousins who aren't as radical and have this relationship to the land, who'd be like, absolutely not. Like, no, we're not going to do that. And so there's obviously like the real tensions that come up with like family and like your own positionality. But what I think that can look like, I think that we can sort things out and make it work in a way that works for everyone. It doesn't have to mean that when people say land back, when Indigenous folks say land back, it's not, you don't have to get too afraid. I think when Indigenous people say land back, settlers get really tense. They're like, oh my gosh, they want me to go back to England. I just watched that Oprah interview. I don't know, it doesn't look great over there. And so they're like, so there's these tensions, and that's not what it means. It's, and I mean, for some it might. I think generally it means, let's have this conversation of the realities of the history of this land, and let's be equitable and a little bit radical in thinking about these futures, because first of all, we are a very individualistic society. Unfortunately, that's where we've come. Exactly, land trusts, co-ops. Like, we have seen models where it works. Like Young Agrarians, they've got that land matching program where they like connect older farmers with like farmers who want to be. Why couldn't we do something similar with Indigenous communities? And like, also, it's also one piece to like just give land. There's also a whole other piece of like providing the tools and resources for folks to actually like be able to like farm the land, right? Like, these things don't necessarily exist, or folks don't have access to these like tools and resources. So that's when you see like Cheyenne from Sundance Farm in just out over with y'all, that like she has a program about teaching folks. Yeah, I was like, I think I saw her on the panel. Yeah, so please go and watch her. We had her come out to Alberta when I was working for an organization. She's so delightful. I can't believe that she is as young as she is and has done the work that she has done. She is phenomenal. She is radical. And she's a great example. She is not Indigenous from what I think, like is Black identified. But I loved her because she was giving a talk. Oh, she is. Oh, that's amazing. Sorry. Yeah, okay. That's wonderful. And so she was talking about doing a panel, and she was on, it was a bit of a, I'm getting at this kind of like resource exchange. So she was on a panel with like some like rich, like white business owners. And one was like, was doing like lumber or something. And so he was talking about being radical and like doing the work. And then she was like, well, can you give me lumber for like my like beds? Like, she just straight up, like, I think just like right then was like, I need lumber for my beds. Like, can you do this? And obviously he probably was like, ooh, like, because it's that kind of like trickiness around it. But that's what it means. Like, that's what it means. Like, if you want to go to the mat for being radical and like doing the work, it means also sometimes taking a hit economically, because we live in this world where people have, like, the have-nots are a result because people have too much. Like, it's not just because, like, we're not going to do that meritocracy argument of like, people worked really hard and that's why they've got all of this. And it's like, everybody works really hard. Like, janitors work really hard. We can't have this conversation. But the difference is folks, because of lived experience, have they have more. And so what do we do to, like, if we want to be radical, it means we have to be equitable. And so that is a bit of a tricky thing to navigate, but that is the reality if we want to live in a world where it's like a bit better for everyone. Yeah.
Thanks, Kyla. We've been having kind of similar conversations like on the last 2 days. It's been a really good event. Susanna, did you catch any comments that you want to pick up from the chat? Was there anything there?
There's lots of great conversation happening in the chat. I haven't
Yeah.
picked up
Any questions, Kyla?
questions though. Just a lot of appreciation for you sharing, Kyla, and you being with us today. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
It's been fun. I want to share something I just learned about the other day. I live close to my parents. They live in a house across the lawn. I live over here. And my Shomis, my grandfather, used to be a commercial fisherman in Lac Seul. And my mom and her sisters talk fondly of memories of him having putt-putt, which is this big boat, right? And we saw a big boat in Natasha's presentation. And I knew kind of just from what my mom has shared is that sometime when she was young, that the commercial fishing licenses were removed from the community. And this is going back to just how, like I was thinking this is just kind of like a last century version of not of the buffalo, but in different contexts. And I think in every area of Canada, you'll find Indigenous people have stories where their food has been taken from them, or just kind of like their food genocide. Emmett mentioned that. So in this area where I live in Northwestern Ontario, there used to be lots of commercial fishing licenses that the reserves had, that community members held. And then in kind of like in the 60s and 70s, kind of a mass swoop of, I think it was kind of followed a big burst of activity and building in community. So a lot of those people who were fishing were then in community in that for a couple summers building, right? And that was sort of like, okay, we don't need to fish right now. We can get paid to build and stuff like this. And after that, MNR came and said, oh, you didn't fill your quota. You must not need your fishing licenses. And so in kind of a short span of years, all those fishing licenses that provide economic, food, economy to people were gone in a matter of years. And it made way for like so many fishing lodges, non-native owned fishing lodges in the area. And now like people there, and I only know of 2 communities in Northwestern Ontario that have commercial fishing licenses. It's kind of just like mind blowing. So knowing like that's a direct history of mine, where my Shomis, he went from being able to commercial fish to having to then guide, right? Like that's how he got income.
Mm-hmm.
Then he became a fishing guide. So like, yeah, we could share stories all over. I bet there's a number of people in our room here could share stories. And so I think it's important for people to know that that is history, like for settlers to know that that is a history of probably the lands that they live near and on, is that somewhere close to them, Indigenous people have had their food, relationships to their food kind of cut somewhere. And also my big lake, the Lac Seul Lake, was flooded 100 years ago, 9 feet, and all of our wild rice beds were covered. So plugging my session tonight, I'm talking with Jana Ray Yerksa about wild rice for 2 hours. So if you haven't cooked your wild rice yet, you better go cook it and then join us for cooking tonight.
Oh, that's wonderful. My grandfather tried to do wild rice in a lake by our farm, but the ducks would always eat it or something. I don't really know how it works. It seems very shocking and interesting to me, because I've been like, can I do that? And then my family laughs at how my grandfather had attempted, but the ducks would always eat it. The seeds, I guess, the rice. I don't know how it works.
I don't know. Well, we're at 1:30, 12:30, and what are you at? 9:30 or 10:30? Trying to keep track of all the time zones. I have one more question from Susanna from last night. Can you stay for a little bit longer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this. Maybe people in the chat will be able to answer this. But what are some things that we can be pushing for at a policy level? I don't know if you know that, or you can share it with us later. I know someone has shared the open food letter, and that sounds like, I haven't looked into it yet, but that might be something. So if there's anyone here that knows of, can chime into that.
I don't know specifically a policy. I know that even just Indigenous Climate Action, we get about like so many open letters like to sign and support, because there's so much happening across Canada in terms of the work that needs to happen around like food stuff. And I think like you don't even have to go so far as it being like a food related policy. Like it can be something as easy as like in Alberta, there's a big push because like the coal mines, like Kenny's trying to do some like coal mine stuff, and Indigenous communities are like, this is going to affect our waterways. Like that affects their food. Like opening a giant coal mine impacts our food. So like you can go and sign on to that.
Yeah.
Supporting like migrant workers and the terrible treatment that they have experienced during COVID with like no safety regulations can definitely be a supporting. And I like, is it directly supporting Indigenous work? No. Do like ICA, we partner with the Migrant Workers Alliance because we recognize that all of these struggles are connected together. So I don't have a specific policy that I'm like, oh, please sign and go look at that. But I mean, you could just like probably Google like terrible things that are happening in Canada and then find somebody who's done some petition and sign it and Google it and research, because yeah, the work is already happening. Just gotta Google it.
If I might.
Okay, I see Josephine wants to chime in. Yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry. So our open letter is sort of designed to try to encompass and encapsulate how the government should be addressing these issues and what in fact policies and treaty commitments and human rights laws and stuff they've committed to. So we've basically compiled those. So we've included UNDRIP, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. We've included the rights of the child to like healthy food and a livable future, duh. We've included, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which is a very powerful framework for those countries that are actually paying attention. And we're saying that within all these goals and policies, be it national or regional or local or whatever, the way in which to carry these policies out is for civil service to actually collaborate with civil society rather than being perpetually oppositional. And we're saying that, infrastructure and land and resources should be, reclaimed and commandeered in order to support these goals, these policy goals, which have already been put on the table. So in a sense, what we're saying is, you already have most of the policies, you're just not using them. Like if you go to the City of Toronto's website, you can't actually find a copy of the Toronto Food Charter that was agreed to by City Council in 2000. But we have it. So we need to reclaim these things and we need to put these things forward. And then in each region or each locality, everybody's going to have a different way of actually exercising or animating that with their local government or their regional government. But we can all collectively go and push the federal government to be reallocating their investment in the food systems away from toxic corporate factory farming and into these more resilient, sustainable forms of food system generation, based again on things that they've already agreed are important. But they like to separate everything. So they silo climate adaptation in this corner and agriculture in this corner and food and public health in these corners. What we're saying is that these can't be separated. They're interconnected, and you already know that. You've already said that. You've also already said that the decade for peoples of African descent is an important time to be considering reconciliation and reparations. They've got the reconciliation promises to Indigenous people. So how about we actually walk these talks and actually, actualize these promises together? So that's what our open letter is sort of designed to do, and we want people to use it as a tool to back up whatever their local claims and solutions are. Sorry about that.
Awesome. Miigwech, Josephine.
Welcome.
Thanks. I think that's a really good way to leave this discussion. Yeah. So the open letters, there's a link in the chat. We can also put it up in lots of different platforms here. Yeah, it can't be compartmentalized. Food is related to so much. It's related, yeah, and it's not just food, everything. It's connected in so many ways. So Gichimigwech, Kyla, for joining me today. Thanks to Rudy for talking with me last week. And I've been bugging him on Facebook for a while now, so I'm glad that worked out. I'm glad, sounds like most people were able to hear, but at least get the gist of his story. And so glad to see Natasha and Andrew and hear about all the important work that they're doing. And again, that's just a glimpse of all the different things that Indigenous people are working to get back to good foodways. So miigwech everyone for joining us today. Yeah, another panel coming up at the top of the hour, and then you can come cook with me at 5. Kyla, so nice to meet you.
Thank you. That was so great.
Yeah.
Just writing in the chat. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
This is awesome.